on the topic, followed probably by quick comments, questions from my side, and then we will open the floor for questions for all the people joining us. And thank you for those who joined or are just joining us. Great. So we thought that this topic is important because, as you know, tourism is one of the biggest industries in the world. Just before the current crisis, we claimed in the industry that 1 of 10 jobs worldwide were really supported by the tourism industry. We claimed that 10% of the global GDP is also created by the industry. Things, of course, have changed with COVID-19. Major drop took place, and according to the scenarios by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, there were 3 scenarios awaiting the tourism industry. One was a moderate, where the global macroeconomic losses were estimated at 1.2 trillion. The second was intermediate, where the losses estimated at 2.2 trillion. And the third is dramatic, where the losses are estimated at 3.3 trillion. WTO, the World Tourism Organization, have chosen to embark on the second option. Ecotourism is one of the major subcomponents of tourism. It was till the COVID-19 one of the fastest growing tourism types. It was a major tool, of course, to fundraise nature conservation and to support local economies. As a sub-segment of ecotourism, bird watching comes in as an important segment of it. And in this webinar, we're trying to discuss bird watching, the context of bird watching within ecotourism in general, and the bird watching from the supply and demand side. From the birder side, the international perspective, the demand, and from the supply side, tour operators and bird guides in the region, current and future trends. So that is the flow. I really hope that this will be useful and informative for everyone. Our first speaker is Tala Momini, and Tala is talking to us in her personal capacity as a sustainable development expert in this occasion, but with a vast experience in ecotourism, bird watching, and the travel arrangements. So Tala will hopefully put the overall context for us. So Tala, can I ask you please to start?
Hello, everybody. I'll start my screen. Is it good to go? Let's go. So thank you for the introduction. I will try to keep it short. Bird watching. We will go through bird watching as an industry in general, and why we're selecting bird watching and something to be focusing on the coming period probably. What's bird watching in general? I guess most of you are bird watchers around. So yes, it is the act of wildlife observation in general, and the tourism part of it would not be different from this. And for me, it was when I first was introduced to bird watching, that was probably like 8 years ago. And I was just mentioning that one of our participants, Dr. Faris, is my mentor there. Thinking of what is bird watching and why people are doing this. For me, it was like in the beginning, people were saying like it's bird watching. You see the bird is nodding his head or putting it down and looking around. Is that bird watching? So the closest thing I thought of is collectors, the stamp collectors, bird watchers. I see there's a lot of relations with them, between them and stamp collectors. Yes, minus the scientific part of it. Usually bird watchers are a lot of many these segments of bird watchers who look for going to a site, from a site to another, to be able to scratch one of the from their list, from the birding list that they have, whether for the region or whether their wish list and so on. So this is kind of like the relationship with the stamp collector somehow. As a tourism itself, aviary tourism or bird watching, it is part of if you think of nature travel, and this chart like makes it even clearer. And this is also one of the UN WTO classifications of aviary tourism or bird watching. So it is part of nature-based tourism, hiking and trekking, which is also part of it. We see in different trends, like some people put the bird watching as part of a soft adventure. So you see it in many ways as a part of the soft adventure. However, because it does have this component of the scientific and research and so on, so aviary tourism, I see that could be by itself. However, yes, it is combined with many soft adventure trips. Bird watching as an industry, why we like bird watching? Yes, we like the birds, we like the environment, having a healthy environment that supports this the ecosystem mainly. But bird watching as an industry itself, if we think of the bird watching, we think of one of the most likely growing niche markets. It is, and we keep saying that this is a niche market. We can't say this is a mainstream at all. The U.S. and Fish Wildlife Services, they claim that this 51 million Americans who are bird watchers, and they do take long haul trips for this purpose. Another look at the U.S. market as well. 46 billion observed birds around the world in the area where they live, and that was 2011. And this is one of the things that is a little bit, this statistics is a bit old because many destinations 10 years ago, they started looking at this industry, and this is when the main of the research happened. We talk also about how many people who went out of their country just for bird watching and just for this activity. So from this number, we have 17 million people who took long haul destinations for bird watching. Another source of, we want to say like information or another people who are looking at this market are the Caribbeans. So the Caribbean Tourism Organization also, they estimate that there is around 3 million international trips worldwide. It's happening. If we have to take a bird view here, a bird view for the whole world, it's we're talking about around 3 million international trips that is happening. From the US itself, only it's 41 billion. Looking at the photography or bird photography, which is very emerging trend we see, we're talking about also like high percentage there. The citizens who took also birding trips, it's around 20 million US citizens. Which is something that is always the second question is the expenditure for bird watchers. They are considered to be very high expended, have high expenditure trend. So they like to buy the mugs, to the binoculars, to the resources, to the trip. So in general, it's and also like we know the value chain of the tourism, bird watching tourism, it's high as well. In general, one also from the good numbers that we also see, it's around 140,000 Dutch have been taking tour company and travel companies, and this according to the Dutch Association for Bird Watching. I think we all agree that this is lucrative market and it's emerging market that has huge potential in general. And just saying that this is part of ecotourism product, it also makes it even a high competitive market. And also it gives it more different segments and different shapes. So we'll come to what kind of shapes that this product would look like. Another, not proof, but another evidence of how much is this market is important. I think many of you are knows the RSPB, and which is this is conservation for birds in general, like a Royal Society for Bird Protection. If something that I like about to share always about this bird society, that this is why it started like around 100 years ago. It's because they wanted to protect birds and to stop women from using the bird's feather on their hats. So they were kind of like against fashion to start with, and second thing is conservation is another thing. So from there is another indicator of having 1 million participants there, or membership there. UK in general, we know that it's a very important market. It's around 9.7% of this are bird watchers. And I remember one of the tourists, he was telling me that why this is a very high number of British are bird watchers. It's because they liked, once they, many of them these days are taking, they're retiring early and just looking, and this is when they start looking around from, they have a time to look from their kitchen window. And this is when they start noticing the birds that they never saw, which was there for so many times. And this is when they start traveling in general, and bird watching would be part of it. So we talked about the expenditure in general. If you want to say what's the birds in general. The profile of who are the bird watchers. The bird watchers in general, yes, they are mainly, if you think of them, are the people who would take the soft adventures, or they would take very mild adventures in general. So we're talking about the segment of from 40 to 70 years old. Yes, they are young. So this is, well, at least for me, it's young because I'm hitting my 40 soon. And they always, you'll find them always members of nature conservation members, associations, interested in wildlife in general. They are usually like to go in very small groups for bird watching, or even for traveling in general. I don't know why, but they are slightly more males. And another tourist that I always take the knowledge from them, he was saying that maybe men, they are more visual, they like to see, so this is probably probability for that. I'm not sure if you agree with me on this. They usually like educated, they know their birds in general. And if you go deeper, who are the bird watchers? So we're thinking of three categories mainly. The hardcore bird watchers, switchers, and this is a photography of another bird expert in Jordan, and I consider him as a twitcher. And yes, he does travel to places just to see a bird and come back. So they are fanatical bird watchers in general. They are on the move. They just go to a destination to find a specific bird that they're looking for. They are, in general, they have their own equipments. They don't have, most of the times even they know what location to go to, or at least the area or the habitat that they're looking for. They don't want to see anything. So you rarely have like hardcore bird watchers who's interested to go to the pyramids probably, or to go to Petra to combine it with their location, with their trip. And this is very small percentage if you think of it. It's around like 10%. It is a very low number. The second category, if you want, it's are people who's in between, enthusiastic bird watchers who are also they are slower when you think of the move, so you can't combine many locations in the same day. They are also, of course, nature lovers. They like to. It is like men and women are kind of like equal. Yes, we know that mainly women drives travel decisions more than men. Yes, we do, and this is and this is when we see more of women travelers when it comes to bird watching here. In general, this is the another thing, the circumstances are minor interest for them, and I mean, like as long as you have birds in the package, this is what they're looking for. It does not have to be all bird watching, but it have to have this component. If we think of the casuals, and I consider myself as a casual bird watcher, depend on the station and so on. They are people, and this is where we, as a company, like the company that I owned called Terhal, this is where we see many of the bird watchers there. So people go to a trip, and this is where they try to the location that they're going to. They ask about the birds, what kind of birds. They go to Wadi Rum and they ask about what birds we might see there. You see the bird watching guidebook with them, but their decision of location or the destination, it's not depending on birds really. So because usually it is a mix of cultural trips and other adventure trips combined with bird watching. So this is usually like an add-on thing, and usually it's estimated for 30% of bird watchers or tourists in general. And if we think like this is if we think of a destination that is starting new on bird watching, probably having this focusing on this category would be much more it's easier to start with. However, the expenditures would not be that much. So it's better to focus on the enthusiastic bird watchers and the hardcore bird watchers. In general, it's like why we're interested in the bird. What makes it bird watching destination? Bird watching destinations, usually we see them on the pattern of the migration, and we know the migration routes in the world, the most famous ones being Jordan, and the Red Sea Flyway is one of the major flyway in the world. And this is what makes also a chance for an opportunity for bird watching packages that combined Jordan with Egypt, with Oman probably. So this is, I mean, like different flyway from Oman, but I mean, like it's easier to combine destinations together when it comes to that. So migration, yes, it is the call for bird watchers and bird trips. Things that is would make a destination talk to itself, or makes it a place that people would be interested in coming to. So it is. We think always that you always, if you look at the graph there, it is one of the trips that is combined usually bird watching with other activities. So going to Petra, and in Petra, this is an example in Jordan. So once you go to Petra, you look for birds in Petra and what birds that can be seen in Petra and the region itself. So having this kind of packages that is combined, having another thing is always to have the bird accessibility. And in case of Jordan, we're thinking of bird observatories that is known in the country. But the destination, what makes it bird watching is the number of protected areas that is there, Ramsar sites, bird important areas. So this is what is like we think of the infrastructure or how it's the habitat is protected in that area. Thinking of also having the right infrastructure when you think of the accommodation itself. It is not rocket science when it comes to that. It is accommodation. It can be can be customized to different types of bird profile, just like to be able to adjust. So in many locations, just to be able to cater for this market who usually rise with the birds, so they want to leave early in the morning, so their breakfast have to be early probably. And they come back, and this is when they probably have their breakfast. So make sure that the breakfast buffet is still will be still on for quite some time.
Another 5 minutes, please, to go, just to remind you of the time. Thank you.
A destination to be able to know what is there for them. So this is the case of of Jordan, knowing what kind of birds that people might be coming to Jordan to look for. Customized packages also is like a combination of the packages. It's from that could be varies from 1 to 2 days, 5 days, thinking of a long haul that they need more than 2 weeks. Also like how we can target people. Targeting usually for bird watching specifically, it's better to always to look for to be able to go directly for bird watchers and to go directly to their nests. So thinking of bird watching specialized fairs like British or the Dutch ones, being able to advertise in the tour operator directories that specialize in bird watching, like let's say the surf birds or bird guides. These are like 2 main ones. The destination to develop their own list of things that people would come to their region. So example of this will not put a blue-tit bird to be watched in Jordan for UK travelers in general. So because it's very common there, we look for things that is very unique to the destinations. So this is the Dutch bird fair, which is also one of the main fairs. Things that is today we see that also created an opportunity for in COVID-19 as well. It is we see that the millennium era is, or generation will be getting into bird watching soon, and because they are discovering bird watching, many documentaries that is out there, the stories, the photography, so it is engaging the youth today. We need to always or think of how we can combine birding as a form of wellness, and this is a new trend that we see, and this is a new opportunity that is there, because we see a lot of people who's doing yoga sites and they doing bird watching. The combination is a bit weird, but it's happening.
1 minute, Tala, please.
Yeah, bird photography is also one of the things that is emerging. The visual and storytelling is it's becoming more and more known, meaning that you see it today now in Instagram. That is I just recently joined. However, the storytelling and having the voice and the story of the bird and the experience that you might have in the destination, it is something that people come for. Today, the applications in general and applications like, when it comes to bird watching applications, also it creates a new opportunity for developers in the destinations and for the industry in general. This is mainly the main points when it comes to bird watching, and having a short example on Jordan. So let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
And I hope we make some time.
Thank you very much, Tala, for this. I am sure that we will have plenty of questions as we go forward. And I would suggest that we then proceed directly to Rob. So if you share your screen, please, Tala, and then Rob, can you please come in? And I would say that those are very interconnected presentations, the first two, and then we can pose a couple of questions to both of you. Please, Rob, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Osama, am I coming across okay?
Yes, the sound has been breaking a bit, but we see the picture very well. Please proceed.
And you've got the presentation on screen. Okay, well, thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Thanks very much to Osama and the organisers for inviting me to talk about bird watching from a sort of an international birders perspective. I'm sort of giving this presentation really on as chairman of OSME, which is the Ornithological Society of the Middle East, the Caucasus and Central Asia. We're a voluntary organisation based in the UK, and one of our sort of objectives is to promote bird watching and bird conservation across the region, which incorporates the Rift Valley and Red Sea flyway. So I thought, first of all, screen's not moving. There we go. I thought, first of all, I would define what we mean by birders. So this probably fits a little bit with one of Talal's definitions, which was twitchers, although I think it's kind of a little bit more than that when it comes to international birders. This is some information from Swarovski Optik, who are one of the main leading brand product manufacturers and producers of optics, telescopes and binoculars. They did a recent survey in their sort of trade magazine, which is called Closer, where they looked at how many birders there are, and they used the United States of America and 12 European countries to undertake their survey. They defined a birder as a person who uses binoculars and/or a spotting scope to watch birds at least several times a month, though I would probably argue that should be several times a week, and who try to identify all of the birds that they see. So that's the kind of perspective that I'm coming from in this short presentation. And they estimated that the number of people that fitted that definition in the United States and a selection of European countries was about 26 million birders, and they estimated from their survey that about 45%, and we'll say half of those people, would travel to places around the world to see new birds. So about 13 million birders from those countries would travel abroad anywhere around the world to try and see new species. I could just say a little bit about how an international birder would arrange a trip abroad. I mean, basically there are sort of two routes. Really, there's going down the route of through an organised specialist bird tour company, of which there are many around the world. I've just put up some logos here of the people, the organisations who are OSME corporate sponsors. So we know that these companies arrange tours within the OSME region. And specialist bird tour companies will basically have an outline of an itinerary and all of the relevant information in their brochures or on their websites. And they do most of the organising for you, including all the flights, arranging the accommodation, etc. So that basically the client or the birder literally just turns up at the airport and everything is arranged for them. The other option is to organise trips themselves, and in some ways this is probably increasing as an option that people take, primarily because of the growth of information that's available by the internet. It's now much easier than it has ever been to book your own flights, to look for suitable accommodation, to look for car hire, and even to find information online about suitable destinations and places within a country to go birding. But of course, this takes time and is dependent on the ease of booking and the availability of information. But yeah, I think an increasing number of people are taking this option and arranging sort of small trips for themselves and for maybe small groups of sort of close friends or people they go birding with regularly. So there's two sort of distinct ways that birders would arrange a tour. But both of these routes would often rely on some local knowledge, at least. Bird tour companies and self-organised trips will often try and use local guides where they can and use local ground agents, etc. And how do birders choose a destination to go birding? And it really isn't rocket science. I think Talal made this clear in her talk as well. Birders choose to go to areas where they will see birds. It really is that simple. You know, the main driver for either for an individual to go either book on a bird tour or to arrange their own tours. In the context of this flyway, there aren't that many birds on the flyway that are sort of endemic to the region. Most birders who come to this flyway are going to be looking for certain sort of specialist birds. It's not like going to somewhere like South America, where all of a sudden you're probably going to see 300 or 400 new species. Some of the species that you will see on this flyway will already be familiar to many people particularly from Europe. But there will be a whole range of different specialist birds that some people will want to see, and I've just put up some examples here. So Syrian Serin, for example, would be I would imagine would be quite a high-profile species for people to see, including myself. I still haven't seen it, and one of my next trips to the region will almost certainly include a trip to try and see Syrian Serin. Crab plover, which is the bird there on the right. I mean, that's a fantastic bird that's got quite unusual behaviour. It's a shore bird. It's obviously very a visual bird. It breeds in burrows in the ground. And it's a sort of species that when people book a tour, they would be very, very interested in seeing a bird such as crab plover. It might not be particularly rare, but it's a bird that you know, really captures the imagination of birders. In the context of this region, going to places where there are sort of specialist groups of birds. So, for example, sandgrouse, birds that rely on sort of arid environments and desert environments, would be a group of birds along with things like horses that birders would be interested in seeing. And then other sort of real desert specialists, and this is one of my favourite, the hoopoo lark. Greater hoopoo lark has a fantastic song flight, has fantastic sort of general behaviour, and a very unusual bird, very specialist bird. And you know, people would be very, very keen on seeing such a bird on a trip. We get a whole suite of birds in some countries that are endemic. So, for example, in Saudi Arabia and parts of the Arabian Peninsula, there's a whole suite of about 13 birds, depending on your taxonomy, that birders would want to go and see because you can't see them anywhere else in the world. And there'll be other species, particularly in places like Ethiopia, where there's a high degree of endemism. So birders will want to go to those places because you can't see those birds in any other part of the world. And just to build on something that Talal said, I'm never overly keen on the phrase that birders are stamp collectors, but I can see where the comparison comes from. Birders do generally keep lists, so you know they are out to try and see as many birds as possible on a trip, and new birds. People keep, for example, global lists, so birders are trying to see as many of the approximately 10,000 species in the world as possible, so that may draw them to your particular country, your particular destination, or your region. And people increasingly keep a list which is called the Western Palearctic list. So the Western Palearctic is a sort of one of the eight biogeographical sort of realms in the world. And a lot of people are starting to keep a list of the birds that they see in the Western Palearctic, which includes a lot of the Red Sea flyway. So listing is quite important to people. It's not just about twitching to see rare birds, it's about listing to see birds that you might not have seen before in a discrete sort of geographical area. But it's also not just about seeing particular species. I think there are an increasing number of birders who choose spectacles or natural phenomena, or want to at least include that in an itinerary. And probably the most obvious one is bird migration. So during the bird migration period, particularly in the autumn, when birds are migrating in huge flocks that can really be quite spectacular. So things like storks and raptors, which the Red Sea Flyway is very well known for. Places like sort of anywhere from sort of Batumi in Georgia through Turkey, and then Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and then down the Red Sea coast. These places can be really fantastic to see storks and raptors in really big, impressive numbers that have got a real wow factor. And birders will choose to go to some of those destinations, and often will spend a lot of time at those destinations watching birds actually undertaking their annual migration. So it's not always just about listing lots of individual different species of birds. It can also be about witnessing really fantastic natural spectacles. And never discount, birders choosing a destination, or at least a destination within a trip, to go and see spectacular landscapes. Where there will be some specialist birds, for example, a habitat like this. It's a spectacular landscape for a lot of people from sort of Western Europe and to an extent the United States. And they will also have some specialist birds. But I would say that overall the prime reason are to see the number of birds and to see natural spectacles, but don't dismiss birders wanting to see fantastic landscapes. One of the key considerations that birders would take into account when booking a tour or arranging a tour, and not just what birders would take into account, but also what bird tour organisations might take into account. The first thing, so on the top left here, you've got birders will almost certainly have with them some quite expensive equipment. Binoculars, for a lot of birders will easily be in the range of sort of $1,000 to $2,000. On top of that, there'll be telescopes, which are likely to be about $2,000. And then you'll probably have some birders, or a lot of birders will have camera equipment, which will again be potentially another couple of $1,000s. So birders are going to have with them probably about $5,000 worth of equipment, and probably even more. And there have been instances in the past where some of that equipment has been confiscated at airports, for example. And as soon as that sort of thing starts to happen, it ruins a holiday because you can't do your bird watching. But information travels very fast on sort of bird watcher networks, and if this starts to happen too quickly, then people really be put off coming to a particular country. So I think if you're in the game of promoting tourism as a sort of a national policy or a national strategy, making sure that your tourism policies are linked to your security and customs policies is really, really, really important. Not to say too much about safety and security. It's probably quite obvious that there are some destinations that are very difficult to travel to undertake bird watching, which is a real shame, because there are some destinations at the moment that birders would definitely want to go to, but are unable to. But even going to some places, there are some subtle concerns that you need to take into account. Things like you can go to perfectly safe countries, but things like going to border areas to see birds might be very difficult because of security concerns. And I'll just give an example. Last year I was in Lebanon, and I was going to the Ajran ruins, and the Ajran ruins is a perfectly safe place to go. It's where I wanted to go to see Syrian Serin, but I didn't see it. But strictly speaking, from the UK government Foreign Office, I shouldn't have been there because it was classified as an area that should be avoided except for essential travel. And this is really quite important from an insurance point of view, because most travel insurance companies don't cover for any instances of where you might need to claim for travel insurance if the advice from the Foreign Office is not to go there. So taking these little things into account can be really quite important when planning itineraries. And the other thing that is really, really crucial, and certainly tour companies will look at this with a real degree of care, is making sure that vehicles that are used are safe. Road traffic accidents account for about, I think, 1.3 million deaths around the world per year, and that, to put that in some sort of recent context, that's probably more than the number of deaths of coronavirus in the last 12 months. So making sure that the car hire companies that you use are providing safe vehicles is really, really important. And probably that your actual choice of vehicle is going to be really what kind of makes or breaks a tour. You'll do a lot of driving probably. If you're doing a dedicated bird tour, you'll probably travel in some instances quite big distances. The last thing you want to do is to spend a lot of time if you've got a vehicle that is breaking down or has poor tyres, and so kind of tyres are regularly going flat. Birders will get really, really annoyed if they have to spend a lot of time waiting for vehicles to be fixed. So it's really important to have a reliable vehicle. It's good to make sure that the vehicle matches your group size. So, you know, if you've got 14 people, make sure that the bus can adequately fit not just 14 people, but also luggage if you're moving between destinations. And of course, people will have a lot of optical equipment. So making sure that optical equipment can be safely sort of stored and is easily accessible in the vehicle is important. And good visibility is really important. So try and avoid blacked out windows, for example, which might be good in the Middle East for keeping you cool and keeping the sun off you, but is not very good if you want to observe birds from the vehicle. If you're using two vehicles, make sure that you've got walkie-talkie communication between both. And if you're making long journeys, make sure that there's plenty of refreshments. These little things are really important to making the birders' experience a pleasurable one that they will kind of report back to their friends and colleagues who may well book trips like that in the future. Accommodation doesn't need to be, kind of high end for many birders. For some birders, they will want that as well, but for many birders, they're quite happy with sort of simple, basic accommodation as long as it's sort of clean and comfortable. Hotels that you use really need to be in a sort of a quiet location. Birders are unique probably in tourists, in terms of tourism, in that they're one of the few groups of tourists who would want to actually be up early. They don't want to have a lie-in. They want to be out early watching birds. Watching birds tends to be best early in the morning when birds are most active. So making sure, and Talal mentioned this, making sure that there is flexibility around breakfast times is really important for birders. They don't want to be sitting around waiting for breakfast. They want to actually be out there watching birds. If you book an accommodation and they've got hotels or accommodation have got nice grounds, that is a real bonus because people can go out bird watching in between sort of breaks or waiting for breakfast or after lunch or in the evenings. That can be a real bonus. And your bird guide. So most companies, whether it's the sort of the tour companies themselves or self-organized sort of individuals and groups, will probably want to use some sort of local guides. And these can be really important. I mean, a local guide can really make the difference between your bird list being 100 species or your bird list being 120 species, if you've got a good, reliable, knowledgeable guide. And guides really need to add value to the birders and the birders group. Birders might not necessarily be familiar with some of the species that they'll see, but they'll be very good at locating birds, and they'll have a good understanding of general identification. So your local guides for birders really need to be, very, very good at bird identification and very, very good at identifying birds both on site but also on call. They need to add value to the experienced birders who are likely to be with them. I think it's fair to say that birds are not more keen on sort of conservation. They're generally very sort of positive towards environmental issues. So making sure that you're practicing responsible tourism will often go down very well with birders. And they will often choose a company that does have good responsible tourism practices. They will prefer to use, in many instances, they will prefer to use local accommodation, guest houses, homestays, that sort of thing, so they know that their hobby is contributing to the local economy. And I think one thing that is going to be increasingly important to many birders is carbon offsetting in the future. I think as the implications of climate become more apparent, people will be looking to do the carbon offsetting. So again, a company or an organisation that promotes carbon offsetting may seem to be attractive to a number of birders, and that is only going to get, I think, more important. And I'll use myself as an example here, is that I now document all of my carbon emissions from all of the birding I do, both here in the UK and abroad. And then at the end of the year, I will make a contribution based on my carbon, based on my personal mileage that I've covered, to a UK-based organisation, the World Land Trust. So I can only see this as being more important in the future. Just a few comments really about coronavirus. I mean, I think I'm saying this really from no expertise in this subject area, but just some sort of personal thoughts, I suppose, from me. I mean, there are going to be obvious implications of the coronavirus on birdwatching tourism in the next few years due to travel restrictions. I've already, for example, just cancelled a trip to Chile that I was supposed to be undertaking in November, which is a real shame, but that's been cancelled. And I know lots of people who are taking their trips. But in the short term, there almost certainly will be fewer people travelling internationally. But I suspect that birders in particular, once things come back to some sort of degree of normality, that birders will have a strong desire to get back out and do international birding. Some of their behaviour might change. So rather than going on long haul destinations, they might go a bit more short haul. So for example, European birders might be more inclined to go a little bit more locally to places like the Middle East and countries on the Rift Valley Flyway, rather than going to sort of South America, for example. And I do wonder if there will be a greater interest in more bespoke holidays, where small groups of people, small groups of sort of friends who know each other, might try and arrange more sort of bespoke trips for them, because they know that the people they are travelling with, aren't a coronavirus sort of risk, if you like. That might be one thing that happens in the future. But really, it is very difficult to know, at least from my perspective. There might be experts out there who are better at predicting what the future of international birding tourism will look like, particularly with repeated waves of outbreaks and no vaccine. So I hope that's given a little bit of insight as to what an international birder would be looking for. I've made it a very general presentation, but I'm happy to take questions. I think we're going to do that at the end. So I'll leave it there, Osama, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. Very enlightening indeed, and I would definitely. I'm myself having many questions, and I will take 2 minutes just to pose one question for Tala, one for yourself, just to build the momentum for other questions, hopefully with the other people present with us. Tala, what is our message today to the tourism regulators, to ministries of tourism, to similar bodies? What is our message? What need be done from their side? Now we are in the COVID, seeing all the crisis, but with, as really Rob put it, the birdwatchers are there. They are now doing more like urban bird watching, perhaps backyard bird watching, in-country bird watching, but where they are coming internationally again soon, and we need to be ready. What is our message there? Tala, you are muted. I picked up.
So the message for bird watching in general. Now, first, I have something for Rob. Is also you're welcome to come to Jordan to watch the Syrian Heron in Jordan, in Donnell. So I think we can make your wish come true as well. What's the message? It is actually bird watching is not apart from tourism industry in general, and things that is we need to look for now is that the time of the crisis, or the time which is we think that is going to, I'm not thinking about all the numbers are saying is that's going to last for the coming 2 years, and this is a long period to start to think of. Maybe there's a lot of saying that it will be very selective travels that will happen rather than more of like the mass tourism, which is bird watching is not part of it anyway. However, what we need now is to create the awareness for destination. Being there and people having some countries, like we know that if you want to go the usual places, South Africa, the Caribbeans, these are the usual Africa in general, or Sri Lanka. These are all more of the traditional places for bird watching. So if you need to know, to build the awareness of the destination, this is the time to do it. And also, and showing what is there, it is what is needed. Meaning is that if you want to think of bird watching, you need to let people know your story of the destination. What endemic species do you have? What rare species do you have? Once everything is open, so let's go. And having keeping the conservation of the sites is as important as everything else. Meaning, if you want, we need to keep our habitat is healthy. So thinking of today, tourism is down, yet we still need to take care of our reserves around the country. So,
okay, let me stop you there, Tala. Sorry, let me stop you there because we need to make the best use of time, and all the greetings to the baby and appreciation for all moms on work. Rob, I've been also checking with tour operators, many of them you mentioned, and you showed their logos. And it seems that they are having a policy of trying to shift all 2020 booking and dates into 2021. And many of them, they reported that people are simply, they're claiming 100% client approval on this, and the clients are ready to postpone their trips and shift it into 2021, hopefully when things are better. One of the marketing tricks that are being used by tour operators is to, among others of discounts and others, they are including donations of a certain percentage of tour price by tour operators to local birding guides or to local economies. Do you see this as an incentive, as a way to really give more incentive for travelers to come to the region?
Yes, definitely. I probably should have actually mentioned that in my sort of last but one slide. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of birders will book a trip and look favourably on it if a percentage of their, the cost or a donation, or however it's framed, is given to a local conservation project. And some people see that as part of sort of carbon offsetting, they'll see that as their sort of carbon offsetting sort of contribution. So I know that quite a lot of for example, the organisations that I put up who support OSME, I know a lot of those organisations do give a percentage of some of the trip profits to local organisations for some trips. And I've had discussions with a couple of those companies about developing trips in the future, and those trips would be sort of an OSME supported trip, and a percentage of that, and it would be advertised as such, a percentage of that would go to local conservation initiatives or the development of guides, etc. So it would definitely be an incentive, I think, for many, not all birders, but it would definitely be an incentive to quite a few, I think.
Great, thank you very much, Rob. So for the sake of time, we move immediately to the supply side in the region, and we have two presentations. One from a tour operator in Lebanon that is specialized in birding, and another from a bird guide in Egypt. So may I invite our dear friend Luis from Lebanon to share the screen and present his presentation, please.
Sure. Can you see my screen now or no?
Yes, can you have the full slide, please, at the full screen?
Very good. Thanks a lot, Osama. Before we start, I would like to mention that the last question that you posed and what Rob answered is typically being implemented in Lebanon. So I think we're all on the same and homogeneous on the same page at the end of the day in terms of trying to present a way that how eco-tour operators are supporting the community and the local guides, which we'll be discussing afterwards in this slide as well. First of all, thank you all for your time. My name is Louis Junior Saad. I'm the tours coordinator at Great Escape. First of all, I would like to start my presentation with a slogan that we at Great Escape rely on and really believe in. Ce qui importe, ce n'est pas de partir, mais avec qui partir. Ça veut dire, it mentions it's not about where you are going, it's about with whom you are going. That's the most important part. However, Great Escape was really established in 2012. Given the, however, it was legalized in 2012, but it has really vast and enormous experience in terms of environmental conservation and nature wilderness and wilderness touring for ages, for several decades. And it's really powered by a small team who are passionate and who are professional guides, have been trained on mountaineering, photography, wilderness activities, capacity building, and team building activities. For that matter, our aim at the end of the day, or vision, is to really support the future generations in trying to envision them what is nature protection, environmental conservation, and sustainability. For that matter, we worked a lot with schools, given the fact that these students are the consumers and are the future leaders in the upcoming generation. For that matter, we worked a lot with Louis Wagman, Lycée Franco-Libanais, and American Community School. Parallel to that, we have a lot of corporate clients who have really believed in our vision and became our ambassadors at the end of the day, such as Aramex, UNDP, Pepsi, Jordan Airlines, and Deloitte, to name a few. However, to make it brief, what are the challenges that we as eco-tour operators face on various levels? One of them being the various stakeholders that we have are not committed. Maybe it could be the municipality, it could be the community, it could be the client themselves, or even the eco-tour operator. For that matter, given the fact that we have various stakeholders, it's very difficult to try to sum up into one common ground or one goal. So that for that matter, we're able to push further and further to reach a homogeneous vision. Keeping these two aside, we have a third part, which is really it's outside of control. Which, for example, we can take an example, Lebanon. We have 3 incidents which we cannot control. One of them being the COVID-19 incident that struck Lebanon in March. We have the revolt of 17 October, and we have the economic crisis. For example, for the economic crisis, it has really drastic and horrific implications on our activities, because eco-tour operators now are obliged continuously to revise their pricing and their costs, given the fact that majority of our works, majority of our gears and utensils we use are coming from abroad. So the USD rate is really causing this havoc among all tour operators. However, to make it even simpler and simpler, what are the basic steps in terms of presenting a program to a client, whomever this client is? Is a slide missing, for example? Okay, regardless, I think there's a problem with my PowerPoint. And the first major steps in terms of presenting this program, first of all, we sit down with the client, we discuss back and forth what are the needs, what are the capacity of this team, who are the participants. After that, we go into a trial run, where we try to come up with a tailor-made program for this client and implement it among each other to see what needs to be adjusted, then go back to the client and see if this tour is acceptable by their needs and implemented. What needs to be really focused on is that all tour operators should focus on a 1 to 20 participant maximum, so that not to go into a chartering system, because in that sense we are implementing and we are really ensuring a really quality of ecotourism rules being applied. Because if you go into more than 20 people, it's going to be havoc in terms of coordination and really applying and implementing environmental conservation as much as possible. How do we market these eco-tour programs? As mentioned in this slide, I would like to focus specifically on one, which is now becoming more and more implemented in Lebanon, which is the partnership with environmental NGOs, which Great Escape has been the pioneer implementing specifically with SPNL. For example, we try to come up and see what are the needs and of these environmental NGOs. We try to be their frontliners for them. For example, with SPNL, We try to implement all stakeholder analysis. We try to implement all environmental programs that they are handling. We try to become the people on ground in terms of implementing the extreme activities they want to implement, going to the community, do some scientific assessments. In that sense, we are their hands on the field, combining our vision and our knowledge with what the environmental NGOs need. Thus, going back to what we implement specifically as eco-tour operators, we try to focus a lot on these 5 categories, which are aligned with the environmental NGOs we have in Lebanon, I think, worldwide. We implement botanical activities, hikings, wildlife interactions, marine wildlife, and avid tourism. As mentioned in this webinar, we're going to focus a lot on the avid tourism, specifically because now Lebanon is becoming more and more as a hotspot and lucrative eco-business, which we have been seeing for quite some time. Specifically because, as we all know, that Lebanon is the second country which experiences bird migration, whether through the fall migration or in the spring migration, where we have around 80%, of the birds passing over the flyway of Lebanon. For that matter, we have a lot of interest, international interest by INGOs and donors to really support and conserve this bird migration and flyway. In addition to that, we know that we have a lot of illegal killing of birds and poaching in Lebanon. So this is really putting a lot on Lebanon in terms of a hotspot to really try to conserve this bird migration. Given the fact that Lebanon, as mentioned, is on this flyway, several local NGOs has been trying to revive or really shed light on these hotspots, and one of them being SPNL, or the Society of Protection of Nature in Lebanon. Some of these hotspots, as mentioned, this document, as seen in this slide, I want to focus a lot on Hemena, which we're going to be talking about further and further. Hemena really is a cornerstone or a bottleneck for all bird migration, where we have tried to implement a lot of IBA studies and KBA studies in these areas, and we are able to really focus on that these areas or these hotspots really can contribute back to the community, or in a way or another. Thus, Great Escape has worked with SPNL in terms of providing several studies and scientific studies to try to focus on what are the natural resources and what are the cultural resources where we can benefit from. In other sense, Great Escape can go to this community. See, you have a bird watching site, you have a hotspot, very good. But what are the additional inputs we can provide for this bird watching tool? In that sense, we can go to the client tell them, we have really a good hotspot here. We have a really bird watching site here. You can make use of the local transport present in the area, the local lodging in the area, the local culinary experience in the area. In that sense, the bird watching experience is not only for the bird watcher, but it's affecting the community as well. It's a win-win situation for both, whether the client or the community. For that matter, these hotspots has been identified, as I mentioned, 15. 5 of them are located in natural reserves. So we have 10 hotspots who are not really supported in any way. For that matter, SPNL and Great Escape have discussed back and forth how to really promote these areas. And it was really, we reached a level where we need to implement something called the HEMA. What is the HEMA specifically? It is a traditional community approach which has been present roughly 1500 years ago, which really it relies a lot on the norms and the values of the Islamic culture. What does it mean specifically? HEMA specifically means a protected area where we have various tribes or locations where they decide on one area where it has really valuable natural resources and cultural resources. Apologies, something's happening with my PowerPoint shifting between slides. Apologies on this. As I mentioned, we try to locate this HEMA, which this HEMA specifically has various natural resources and cultural resources and as values where these tribes can make use of, and they come together, discuss all conflicts. It's a conflict-free zone. It's a participatory approach where they back and forth discuss whatever issues they have. In that sense, it's an area where they benefit from. For that matter, SPNL and Great Escape worked a lot on this modality to make use not only of the bird watching area by itself, but really supporting the community and come up with something more called as the revival of the Hema, which led the SPNL to win the 2018 Midori Prize. Thus, using this old model or traditional model, which we're able to change it to a hybrid Hema, where we shed light really on the cultural values that every community has and the uniqueness that every community has. In that sense, for example, in Lebanon, we are able to reach 25 Hemas. However, these 25 Hemas had its own uniqueness and its own traditions, and its own bird watching side, its own cultural activities or environmental activities or nature-based activities. So roughly any person who comes into Lebanon wants to really enjoy this beauty, rather than we go to the community and try to see what they have. The community already has everything ready. The foundation is ready. We can present it automatically to the client. In that sense, these 25 Hemas that we have all over Lebanon, a client can come really think about it in a way that every Hema needs 3 days. That's 25 Hemas times 3 days. That's 75 days of enjoying the uniqueness in one particular country. Thus, Great Escape is implementing as we speak something called the Hema to Hema program, where we try to link these 25 Hemas together. In that sense, rather than having only a 3-day program, we have roughly 75 days program, where every 3 days we are moving from one place to another. We are enjoying the local lodging, the local culture, the local food, the local area, natural-based activities that can be implemented. Given the fact that these Hemas are really supported by the community, they are from the community to the community. In that sense, it has a sense of ownership to them. This is the point that Rob was mentioning before, how we play tricks on the client to make them really buy the product that we are providing, because we mentioned specifically that the people or the guides or the local guides are from the community, and we pay and what part of this the cost of the activity goes back to the Hema as a contribution to the Hema. So in that sense, we are showing that we're giving back to the community, to the local guides, and back to the Hema for its conservation and its protection. So in all, we are supporting the community. The client is being delivered what they expect, and as eco tour operators, we are presenting a new idea that is really prevailing bit by bit. So as I mentioned, this is a very quick diagram of, it is not updated yet, but these are the first Hemas that have been located in Lebanon. As I mentioned, they now, as 2020, they are 26. We have one at the coast in Anfe, we have one at Hamena, for example, and we have in the West Bekaa. So for example, just to give you a quick summary, let's say we're at the coast, we enjoy coastal birds. We go up to Hamena at the mountains, we enjoy really where we have high raptors, and we go to West Bekaa where we have a bit of aquatic birds. So in that sense, up to in 1 week or roughly 9 days, we are able to cover the 3 environmental changes of birds. For a bird watcher, I think that's a fantastic approach. Thus, what we can say at the end that Hema concept is trying to connect the local community with the local cultures to provide them with a new insight or a new mind and spirit in order to present it and really develop the local community as much as possible. As I mentioned previously, that the local guides that we make use of are really being trained on ecotouristic activities, and they are tailor-made upon the nature-based tourism present in their area. For example, in Anfe, the trainings are not the same as in Hamena, not the same as in the Bekaa area. They are tailor-made as much as possible. However, some of the basics ones are regarding bird watching, survival skills, biodiversity, photography, and safety, sustainable hunting, to name a few. The third part of our presentation will be tackling the COVID-19 and its implications on us as eco tour operators. There was a study done by ILO, which is the International Labour Organization in Lebanon. It mentions that we have roughly around 51% of enterprises stopped working. And from these 51% enterprises, 64% of the employees did not receive their salaries, which is huge. Adding to that, we had to stop all activities related to human contact. So the negative influence on the ecotourism sector by itself was we had to cancel a lot of activities, if not all. We had to do drastic changes in our strategies and try to adapt as much as possible. Thus, this led us to additional burden on additional cost, some of them moving to hybrid training. as much as possible, we try to provide hybrid trainings to our local guides and to our community members, and keeping in mind that whenever there's a need and necessity for a physical training, we try to implement as much as possible social distancing and relying a lot on hygiene materials. Apart from that, which we reduce the group sizes to almost implementing private touring for people who know each other, who know their community, who know if they have been in contact with somebody who has COVID-19 or anything. In that sense, we try as much as possible to reduce the contamination possibility, given the fact that this would lead to really drastic problems to the eco tour operator as well. Finally, after saying all of this, I would like to end it up with a small video about one hema, where it started and it bloomed due to bird watching. It's Hema Hemena, and because of this bird watching site, we were able really to support the community and try to interrelate all of the activities present in the area under the umbrella of bird watching, because they are complementary activities to it as well. Oh.
We're enjoying the pictures, but there's no sound, Luis. Huh?
Sorry?
I mean, we are enjoying the pictures, but we hear no sound. Huh?
Okay, can I open it from outside? Is it possible? I'm going to open it outside. Yeah, sure. Can you see? Everybody can see now?
Still not yet.
Osama, can you see the video?
No, not yet. Probably you should stop sharing and reshare again, Luis.
When you select to share the screen, when the window pops up to select what you're sharing, down the bottom left of that window, I think there's a checkbox that says share computer audio or something along those lines. And that will allow us to hear the video that's playing on your computer.
I'll try to see it, but there's only your entire screen, application window, and Chrome tab. So there's application window.
So it's usually down the bottom left of the tab of the down the bottom left of the window that pops up when you opt to share your screen.
I can't see it, to be honest. I'm sharing the screen you're seeing now, apparently, but there's no tick box where I can share the sound.
It's before you clicked go ahead to share. So if you click the share screen button in the toolbar down the bottom, and then you select which window you want to share, and down the bottom of that screen, before you press to share, there's a share computer sound option.
I don't have it on my open text box in front of me. There's share your screen.
Luis, under the circumstances, I think we either have the photos with, the video with music, or we just drop it. So use the best of time.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. Try to see. It's possible. Can you run it from your laptop, Osama? Is it possible?
No, I don't have the link for that. In the presentation, I didn't have it. I don't have the link for it. Okay, so let's drop it. This is
yeah,
fine.
sure.
I'm sure we can share the link with everyone. And I did also ask everyone who is interested in getting the presentations to just share their emails in the chat so that we can say it. Any final words, Luis, from your side?
Yeah, just to end up with the last slide, which is a quote from Albert Einstein, which is look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better when we go back to the roots, which I think is the essence nowadays, going back to the roots and seeing everything simpler. And this is from my side. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much then. And we will just also keep the questions. Please unshare from your side. Okay, and then probably we will move into the next presentation. I will kindly ask Amani from Egypt to please go ahead and start her presentation. Thank you, Amani, for joining. Sorry, I hear that you had an accident. I will trying to be moving with the slides from my end, and highly appreciating that you are still participating with us. The floor is yours. Amani, you are muted, so can you unmute, please?
Okay, again. Okay, good morning, everybody. Birds migrate twice a year. Egypt lies at the heart of the Red Sea and the Rift Valley Flyway. Birds were important in ancient Egypt. The falcon god Horus was the protector of kingship. The vulture goddess Nekhbet, she was the patron of the south in Egypt. The ibis god Thoth was the god of wisdom and learning. Birds are important to humanity. They are indicators for ecosystem health and changing environment. They are scavengers, pollinators, and seed dispersers. Birds are inspirations for humanity. Essential skills for bird watching: understanding birds, bird groups, when and where do they appear, resident birds, endemic birds, passing birds, winter birds. We should also understand the habitat of birds and learn how to protect their areas. Next. The bird should be identified. We see the bird, its size, shape, relative proportions of legs, beaks, wings, etc. Its beak characteristics like color and shape, its behavior, how it feeds or how it flies, its habitat, where do we see these birds? Next. We also identify birds by listening to them and learn how to identify their sound. We should record it to familiarize ourselves with the bird's sound. Try to relate, to make a personal reference to songs of birds, like like Arabic names. We can easily learn this from an expert. Next. MSB, which is Migratory Soaring Bird Project and Tourism Sector. The key threats being addressed by the project: habitat destruction and degradation due to indiscriminate tourism and development along the Red Sea coast, mass tourism, unregulated tourism activities, lack of awareness, absence of bird watching tourism opportunities. Next. Organizing birdwatch activities. We should review the itinerary, when to go. So we check the client's preference or predetermined schedule for activities. Time of the year, the migration or wintering. Time of the day, usually early morning or early evening is usually the best. But birds do different things during different times of the day. Next. Guide bird watching activities. So we should review the itinerary and how to go to the sites where we will watch the birds. So we can go by bus, by jeep, by boat, horses, or even by camels sometimes. Next, organizing bird watching activities, preparing equipments and tools, binoculars and telescopes, notebooks and trip reports, additional educational materials such as brochures and leaflets. The next, organizing bird watching activities, safety, issue permits if necessary, give clear instructions, health and dietary requirements, first aid kit, communication devices, water and food supply. Take a first aid course if possible, and of course a dress code should always be followed. Next, characteristics of bird watching guides, communication skills, interactive approach to clients, good understanding of birds, and should not be afraid to say, I don't know. Clarity about all facts and information, full disclosure. Personal skills, sense of humor, flexibility, patience, show excitement all the time. Next, ethics, bird watching ethics and requirements. Promote the welfare of birds and their environment. Respect laws and the rights of others. Ensure the group compliance with the bird watching ethics. Don't disturb the birds. Next, the challenges. Required approvals for some areas, lack of bird watching facilities and infrastructures, limited bird watching activities in the market. Next. How guides market themselves. Tour guides should introduce themselves to different tour operators. Bird watching skills should be mentioned in their CV. They should coordinate with hotels and lodges to organize trips for their guests. Also online marketing such as Facebook, internet forums, and travel websites. Okay, shukran. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amani, and appreciating again your participation despite the accident you had, and very sorry for that. Let me have a quick, before opening the floor for questions, let me have a quick comments on both presentations. Louis, if I start with yourself, describing the readiness and the preparedness of Lebanon as a bird watching destinations, among other socio-economic complications that you have mentioned. When talking about hygiene and health issues, as you know, in different countries, there have been guidelines, protocols. I would like to highlight, for example, in Spain, the Spanish Institute for Tourist Quality, the ICTE, that had certain protocols for guest houses, for tours, for bird watching tours. How our destinations, in this case, Lebanon in particular, is ready using such protocols while on the tour?
I can answer you very quickly in a very straightforward way. A practical example. For example, in Hima Hamena, the municipality has been doing a lot in terms of awareness sessions, talking with all shop owners, with all restaurants, and with the houses, and how to do proper cleaning, distribution of sanitizing materials, continuous awareness session of what are the needs in terms of do proper cleaning to the house, to do hygienic activities. In that sense, we try to minimize as much as possible any contamination or sickness. That's from one part. From the eco tour operators part, it's their job in the second phase, which is really scouting and try running, to check all of these information, to check that really are they abiding by WHO rules and regulations. I would say till now, in terms of the commercial sector or corporate sector, it is abided. The only issue that is missing is the awareness and really the responsibility of the individual themselves. This is where this is the pivotal point.
Yeah, Lucy, are these initiatives taken by the industry voluntarily, or are those taken as obligations by the regulators in the destination?
They are obligations. That's part number one. And number two, as I mentioned, that really there's a sense of understanding and responsibility on an individual level that really, and if I'm contaminated or I'm sick, I cannot really affect anybody, and I will come up and say it straightforward. So that's why we do a trial run before to check all of this information as well.
Thank you, Louis. Amani, quick questions for you, please. Are bird guides licensed as such in Egypt?
Guides in generally are licensed by the Ministry of Tourism, but we focus on our training on archaeology. So we are mainly trained on archaeology, but you don't have somebody who's licensed as a bird guide. We started to be trained by the MSB project, and that really brought into the market a big number of bird watching guides or field guides for bird watching. Before that, believe me, I didn't have any kind of knowledge about birds. It's a pity. There is one nice ancient Egyptian tomb called the Tomb of Birds, and it's full of birds. And we just used to walk by it without mentioning anything. One experience I would like to tell you, 2014, I had just an archaeological tour, and the client, she was a bird watcher. So she got me into this hobby. And I discovered that if you talk to anybody about it, immediately you will get him into the hobby. And but I lacked the proper knowledge till I had the training by the MSB, and it changed much. It was a wonderful experience. Since then, I added into my tour.
Thank you very much, Aman. I'm very happy Tala mentioned that training as well, and that was supported MSB project in Egypt, and you also in Egypt, in Jordan, and you in Egypt. I'm really proud for that. Another question, please. What relationships are there between bird guides in Egypt? Do they communicate? Are there any relationships between them?
Actually, there is one union that brings tour guides together. But we don't have a union for bird guides. But nowadays, still the MSB is doing this in Sharm el-Sheikh. It's an informal, but still it brings bird guides together or field guides together.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And may I open the floor for questions? We are receiving some questions, but still let us go by ones we have. For example, for Lebanon and Egypt also, Firas Rahahli, our dear friend from RSCN, is asking about who are the most target groups of bird watchers that are interested in those countries. So in Jordan, in Lebanon, who are the bird watchers that are coming to Lebanon? Probably Louis can ask. And in Egypt also for Amani. Louis?
Yeah. For Lebanon, basically, we have been receiving visitors for the last 2 to 3 years from abroad, specifically from Europe and the US, primarily from Sweden, from Switzerland, from France, from the UK, from the US as well. To be honest, we had from Turkey. And in addition to that, we have local bird watchers in Lebanon. So it's really a diverse clients and bird watchers from various continents.
Thank you. Amani, any specific nationalities you'd like to mention of bird watchers coming to Egypt?
Actually, the one I told you, she got me into this hobby, she was American-German. But I noticed that we received the biggest number of tourists from Britain and Germany. Less Americans if compared to British and German.
Right. Thank you very much. Let us also have other questions. Tala, can I ask you, please, when speaking about the future, there are two approaches. There's the approach of wait it out, wait until basically this is over, the COVID, which is to have a vaccine in place, and then there's no risk, and then bird watching will come again. And there is that approach of experimentalists who would go with do it as long as you can under the control with all the procedures of, as always, the social distancing and all the arrangements. How do you see the destinations are there promoting themselves in the region? Are we in the region in the wait it out, or are we preparing something and calling really for experimental, more adventurous travelers to come in?
To be honest, like you don't see much trends depending on the country. So like in case of Jordan is not open yet. I mean, in case like even if you want to experiment, we're not able to experiment now. But if you think like what I think is basically we should start both approaches. We don't know when it's going, things will be, this is the new norm or not. But there is a very big possibility that's going to be the new norm. And meaning is that even that if there's the COVID is out, probably maybe there's another endemic will happen. But also a lot of people saying that the habits of COVID will last a bit, like the social distancing and being mainly online and so on. So both ways or both tracks, it will require us the same measurement, which is basically preparing the destination and trying to promoting as much as possible, even at this stage. And the question, which is with the very minimal investment. So we're not asking to go for bird fairs to start with or to invest there. But starting with online promotion, from visuals, from storytelling to cheap, like basically marketing and tools that can happen. And this is mainly its own destination promotion rather than tour operator promotion, I see. So it can be both tracks.
Thank you. Thank you, Tala. Rob, can I ask you which destinations within the Red Sea, the Rift Valley Red Sea flyway, including the countries of I don't know, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Djibouti, which destination is a candidate of coming back again to the map of bird watchers once now we are seeing easing of the restrictions? And what advice do we give those destinations to work on in preparation of what is to come?
Thanks, Osama. I think it's very difficult to predict really, because so much of it is going to be dependent on each country's sort of response to coronavirus and the easing of restrictions, particularly around flights. I mean, I really do see that birders will be increasingly interested in bird migration and looking at the spectacles of bird migration. I mean, bird migration has been sort of really promoted a lot, particularly on social media and sort of the, how fantastic it is to watch. So I think any countries that can really make the most of that. So I'm thinking of Lebanon, potentially Jordan, although I don't know which areas there are particularly good for bird migration. Israel has very good bird migration sort of hotspots. I think the other growth area, if I think that's included in this seminar, would be Saudi Arabia along the Red Sea coast. Along the Red Sea coast and the Asir Mountains, there are many of the Arabian endemics that can be seen. And I think that will become a popular destination, I think, in a few years' time, once the restrictions are lifted. So prior to the COVID outbreak, you could, for example, get an online tourist visa for the first time for decades. And that would be a very popular destination, I think, with birders, sort of a 7 to 10 day bird watching tour looking for endemics. But it's very difficult to say, because the response is going to be very much dependent on country by country restrictions.
Very true. Okay, Louis, again, you spoke about HIMA. We describe it as a driver for change. How can this apply best on bird watching, moving from just creating the appropriate geographic space where bird watching is taking place within a HIMA into an enabled destination for bird watching?
As I mentioned within the slide, bird watching as an activity, it could be a standalone. But at the end of the day, what is the ROI for it for the community? How are we sustaining this location? If there's no sustainability for this location, after a couple of years, nobody will be visiting it. For that matter, in the HEMA concept, we try to build a sense of ownership to the community, and meaning we tell them this is your area. You need to protect it and provide all the necessity activities so that the bird watchers can be present and be part of this community, from lodging, from making use of the local food that they can consume, or the lodging, it should be from local concept, making them part of the community, as they become from a client to more of a family member.
And within this context, Louis, as well, probably compared with the other countries in the region, probably Lebanon got a higher number of local bird watchers when it comes to it than other countries in the region, and I may be very well challenged on that. But how did the COVID encourage people going back to nature to really experience those backyard birding potential? And how can we in our countries really drive more people to discover birds, and how we can have them return to nature and birds for solace, especially under COVID?
To be honest, you are totally right about this point regarding that we have a very high number of local bird watchers. I would say do not underestimate the power of a binocular. To be honest, we have many cases of people who are really hunters, and I would say some of them are poachers. When they really experience the idea of holding a binocular and shooting at the bird with the binocular, it gave them a driving force which is far more powerful than simply using a gun. Because at the gun they cannot see a bird; it's just a simple dot. Whereas the binocular by itself is you are observing the bird, you are observing the wings, from point A to point B, seeing everything about it and following it. I come from a background from my family they are full-fledged hunters. I have no problem saying that. But to be honest, since I really 10 years ago I was given the holding the binocular, going back to nature, seeing really what are living at the simplest way possible. This gave me this drive to say I need to conserve the nature I'm in. I need to conserve the community where I'm living in. I live from Hamena. I am from this community. I need to try to accommodate as much as possible to conserve this community, this nature, this environment, this biodiversity, because I think it's the only lifeline we have going from this concrete forest back to nature.
Great, excellent. Rob, how would people feel about birding post-COVID period? The implications seems to be by tour operators now, they seem to be having extra empty space in vehicles. They seem to be asking people even at lodges or eco rest houses to take their shoes off before enter in, to move again into those hygienic issues. It's a bit wondering how they ask people now to do check-in on app or check-in outside in an outdoor area, so that this is done in a way that doesn't make any contamination, use no pens, or having key rooms disinfected, or even birders on the ground not allowed to be really sharing their binocs or telescopes, or even having a way for not sharing definitely their personal items of bottles, water bottles, repellents, creams, and so. How would all those new measures may impact the birder on the ground in the post-COVID-19 period?
Yep, that's a good question. I think I'm guessing that many birders are, they're just normal people. So back home, wherever they're from, they will have been experiencing traumatic restrictions on their lifestyle and changes of how they approach their life. So I think some of this is going to be replicated if they're prepared to go on holiday. To go and watch birds. It's kind of only an extension of what they're doing at home anyway, and their kind of national restrictions that they're used to. Personally, from my own personal experience, I would be more than happy to continue going abroad to do sort of bird watching tourism, and I'd be more than happy to, have restrictions put on me, whether it is, some of those things that you've just mentioned. yeah, maybe it is going to become sort of the new normal, at least for the next few years, is that the way we run our lives is going to change, and bird watching will be no exception to that.
It's very relaxing to see that travelers, especially bird watchers, will be ready to accommodate all those new aspects of the trip that will be, as you said, a normal in the coming period, taking it forward, and hopefully that will be also the case. May I also check if there are questions? I don't know if we are receiving any. Let me just check the back. Basima from Lebanon, she is telling us that training for bird guides is taking place soon in Lebanon, supported again by the MSB project and under the patronage of the Ministry of Tourism. This is great news, Basima. We look forward to more training taking place. Obviously, this is one of the issues that need to be taken forward. There is, we know that there is no, despite the fact that the tourism traffic is not at its best, but knowing from before that, we knew that there are no enough bird guides professionally local in the ground in many of the destinations to meet the demand. That was the case before COVID. I think that this is a gap that needs to be bridged, as Tala said, within the gap that is taking place at the moment, within the freeze situation. We need to proceed into many actions from our sides, and probably the National Guides preparedness is something on that. And we have had as I said, we have had this before. We have had that chance to do that in Jordan, and Tala has been there and had that program and developed many skills with many other friends. So a good point from Basima. Other points, let me double check, sorry. We're trained on bird. So Osama El-Gibali, thank you for the notes. The total number of trained guides in Egypt on 110 tour guides, and I would say those are bird watchings, and that is a very important initiative that took place in Sharm in conjunction with the tour guides, their association and the tour operators. And I think this has been a very important thing, and creating the destinations, I should add. And I think that has been also one of the iconic successes of the migratory soaring bird project in Egypt, in even turning the waste management site into a bird watching destination. Something like this, similar to the bird observatory in Aqaba, took place in the sewage ponds in Sharm. And thank you, Osama, for reminding us on that. And we were really honored to see the Minister of Environment in the last days of Egypt on the site promoting bird watching. And this is an example really of how we bring the authorities on ground. Hopefully the Ministry of Tourism in the other countries and tourism boards will go into that. Tala, would you like to describe, and I know you have been having meetings with the Minister of Environment the other day, and looking at the authorities and the regulators, how would you describe the tourism board, for example, of Jordan, the Ministry of Tourism, to what level they are aware and engaged? Did they take part into activities? I'm not sure the bird fair, for example, that was held last version had to be virtual on its last version for the first time. Was there a participation, for example, from Jordan? Are we having the authorities concerned and doing what need to be done on those areas? Tala, you are muted.
To start with, is like when you think of authorities, destination marketing in general, it is a responsibility of the authority, which is like in case of Jordan's Jordan Tourism Board, and the tour operator itself. So these are like two of them, and this is how most of the destinations started. How do we see the authorities in Jordan? It is not as I mean, like there's other priorities for other niches. We see that when it comes to that trend, cultural tourism is one thing. Adventure tourism or soft adventures is another one, which is very Jordan is focusing on. The destination brochure that was developed 5 years ago, probably from which is BirdLife International, where like the major helps the RSCN, Jordan Tourism Board. We didn't see much of a what do you say, like distribution for this brochure, which is a destination brochure. So I see it's very modest efforts that's happening. However, this applies for all tourism niches. It's not particular for bird watching specifically. Though I think that this is usually in Jordan, we rely much on the government. However, the the user content generation, it is today is as important as any other promotion that's happening. So having tour guides going out to the field, talking about what's happening in Jordan, what's there to see. I've been there and saw the you know, like the desert larks, promoting this kind of a species, which is very rare, that combining the stories, real life stories. I think this is will do that, will help with the effort of knowing the destination. We should not rely only on the government or the destination marketing in general. So because it's becoming like the effort of everybody today. And speaking of everybody today, I thought of taking this opportunity, and I just knew that the training for the BirdLife International that they helped in Jordan, it happened also in Lebanon and in Egypt, which is great, I think. However, I mean, like training, as I see it, training for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, how intensive it is, would not make a tour guide or a bird watcher's tour guide. So many practice that have to happen, many field trips that have to happen. And thinking of this, and probably this is a message for you as well, and BirdLife and the organizers, if it's possible that we try to build on the capacity of bird watchers that's existing in the countries, these countries today, and build on their knowledge, try to have a bigger group, more of specialized guides, train these specialized guides, and because they are going to help in the destination marketing. Once they're active and on the go, it will help out definitely.
Thank you very much, Tala. Your voice is heard. This is a message for us, and also a message hopefully for our partners in the countries. More training, capacity development is needed. Obviously, a short course doesn't make an echo or a bird guide. That is a lifetime, perhaps, experience going on, and we need to keep pushing. We are pushing, and hopefully we'll continue to do that. And we also hope that need to be heard as well. Amani, there is also a question for you from Alex, speaking about the geographic position on Egypt being located as the bridge between continents, and obviously that brings all the benefit of the birds coming and migrating between Africa and Eurasia. To what extent does this fact influence the bird watching activities in Egypt?
Of course, it makes Egypt one of the destinations that receives a big number of tourists, but still I feel that we need to push more on this. That's not the number of tourists that we receive is not really suitable for what we have. I think we need to do more to bring more tourists.
Yeah, and Amani, is it also the case of bringing, and Tala referred to this, bringing and joining archaeological trips with the bird watching trips, and to what level this is happening? I'm looking at the current, for example, programs in the market. For example, one of the two operators offering Egypt, and then you have the trip after that for archaeology. The Rock Jumper, for example, in South Africa is already suggesting Ethiopia trip, where you do the bird watching next, I think, next spring, 2021, and then you have an extension for archaeology. Is this working, the combination, the mix between archaeology and birding?
Yeah, I did it. But actually it was very hard because bird watching has to be early morning or early evening. Sightseeing is usually from 9 to 8. So whoever arranges this tour has to bear in mind that there should be like, more preparations, because we usually rent cars for like 8 hours. Security give us permits for certain, so these are usually different times. But I did, it was very long. But I think, yeah, they should bear in mind that there's different hours for the different, for these two different tours. But since I fell in love with bird watching, I added to my programs anyway. And tourists, I asked them, are you bird watchers? They say no. Okay, let's start together. I show them these birds on the tours, on the walls of the tombs, and then I started the sightseeing.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much for that, Amani. Do we have?
Osama, it's like for your question is it easy to combine? It actually depends on the location. In terms of Jordan, it was not as challenging. It is basically, we were lucky that most of the many of the highlights in the country, it has unique birding locations. Does not mean that it's all unique, but at least combining the highlights of the countries would be able. You can. It's nice to combine it with the bird locations mainly. Yes, the challenge of the itinerary itself and having out of the beaten track location, which is very important. But adding like nobody would want to come to Jordan and not seeing Petra, or no one wants to come to the Dead Sea area and not to go to the Dead Sea. Yes, you can do see the Dead Sea sparrow probably in the area, but why not to have a dip in the Dead Sea, which is a very unique experience. So, I mean, yes, the combination, it would be tricky to have the highlights of the country combined with the bird locations. However, it is doable. It is doable because many of the accommodations even are located next to the attraction.
Thank you. Rob, where do we start? Bringing back the bird watching again into track for destinations. Do we start from all over again? Familiarization trips, proceed into what is happening now, soft cancellation, for example, policies by tour operators, flexible booking arrangements. Even some tour operators are offering some discounted certificate by the £500, the certificate for £250. Is this the real start? Are we starting again from scratch? Where do we start in putting this together?
It's a good question and probably a difficult one for me to answer, not being sort of closely linked to any particular bird tourism groups. I mean, I don't think you have to start again from scratch, though. I mean, some of the destinations along the flyway are already well known, and people will wanting to be, will be wanting to go to those again. I mean, Ethiopia is a really good example. I mean, Ethiopia is a well-known wildlife tourism destination, not just for birds. So people will go there anyway, and so will the big bird tour operators. I think where it might be a little bit difficult is for countries who are just starting to try and develop more tourism. It could be that some of the bird tour operators won't want to take too much in the way of risks with developing new tours to new destinations. They'll probably focus on their sort of core tours that they've already got set up and running. So for some countries, they're at the beginning of trying to develop new tours with new companies. It might take a little bit longer to get those off the ground. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't see any harm if the finances are available to do some familiarization trips again and get some of the some of the key players in birding in Europe or maybe even America. So I think again it's going to be a combination of different approaches for different countries, I think.
Okay. Our colleagues from Ethiopia are asking in EWNHS, our partner, about how we can facilitate exchanges of information and linkages between the bird watchers as community tour operators and the national BirdLife partners in their destinations.
Good question. I mean, I think the BirdLife partners are a really good place. A really good place to start. Some of those conversations. I mean, trying to promote yourselves and exchange information via social media is, you know, is increasingly a really important thing to be doing. So using Facebook and using Twitter and targeting some of those messages, video clips of birds and that sort of thing, targeting some of those at some of the tour operators that you're already aware of. Using for Ethiopia, it would be, you know, things like the Africa Bird Club, for example, which is the equivalent of OSME in the African continent. I think just continue to do what many people are already doing, but maybe do it more and more.
Great. Thank you very much, and good message for our young communication team in Ethiopia, and new tasks to be added to their list. Great. Thank you very much. I see that we are on time. I only would like then to close. I would like to thank all our 4 speakers for their great participation. I would like to thank all BirdLife partners within the countries that have participated as speakers or with us, and all the other participants. Really appreciate it. Definitely, this is a topic that needs to be further investigated, especially as we go along and as we move ahead into post-COVID period. We are there for that, hopefully, and we all promise ourselves better times to come after the current hard time. So finally, I would like to thank my team also for arranging that in the UK, in Amman. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Until next webinars, all the best of luck and good luck. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Osama.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.
Bye.